With a heavy focus on the COVID pandemic during the past 2 years, it has been important not to lose sight of another blight that has afflicted the world, especially South Africa, over the past 4 decades or more: HIV/AIDS. At the forefront of this fight against HIV/AIDS has been Professor Qureshi Abdul Karim. Had it not been for her critical, life-saving research, HIV/AIDS in South Africa would have wrought even greater devastation. Research that has earned her worldwide recognition and numerous awards. A daughter of KwaZulu-Natal, she has risen from humble beginnings. Her parents, small-scale vegetable gardeners, but also mentors who instilled in their daughter a passion for knowledge, enabling her to develop an insatiable curiosity in matters scientific from the age of 2. Inspired too by dedicated teachers, albeit at poorly resourced schools. There followed degrees, first at what was the University of Durban-Westville, then Wits, a master's degree from Columbia University, and a PhD from what is now UKZN. In the 1980s, there was a short spell of teaching together with anti-apartheid activism, offering training in how to provide first aid to comrades injured during protests. But the big pull has been research, which she has sustained for over 30 years, developing this particular focus on HIV/AIDS. In 1989, establishing the Medical Research Council's AIDS program in KZN, paying special attention to factors determining HIV infection in adolescent girls, and devising strategies to introduce antiretroviral therapy in poor, marginalized communities. This latter endeavor brought her huge acclaim. From 2007, Professor Abdul Karim was the principal investigator for a clinical trial named CAPRISA 004, CAPRISA being the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, partly initiated by her and funded by the National Institute of Health in the USA to the amount of 140 million rand. This research led to the development of the tenofovir gel, a vaginal gel containing an antiretroviral that had a high success rate in preventing HIV infection. This development hailed as a milestone in AIDS research, earning her a standing ovation when she presented the finding at the International AIDS Conference in Vienna in 2010. The leading journal, Science, ranking it among the top 10 worldwide scientific breakthroughs of 2010. It led to the World Health Organization recommending that a pill containing tenofovir be taken daily as a standard HIV prevention measure for those at high risk. Research into HIV prevention has continued. New woman-controlled methods are being tested in CAPRISA's clinics. And Professor Abdul Karim is directing research to ascertain whether social incentives can curb HIV infection rates, especially among teenagers in KZN. Holding professorships at the UKZN Medical School and at Columbia University, she has played a key role in promoting research in Southern Africa as director of the Columbia University Southern Africa Fogarty AIDS International Training and Research Program that has trained over 600 scientists in Southern Africa. An A1-rated scientist, she has published over 200 articles and edited several books, serving too on the US-based board of directors of Friends of the Global Fight Against AIDS, TB and Malaria, as Deputy Chair of the World Health Organization Alliance for Sexual and Reproductive Health, and in 2017, appointed as the UN AIDS Special Ambassador for Adolescents and HIV. This has not been an easy journey for Professor Abdul Karim, having to confront patriarchy in two main ways. First, as a woman scientist, enduring the experience of not being taken seriously, finding, for instance, her ideas being dismissed at meetings simply because she is a woman, or saying something that is ignored, only for a man to say exactly the same thing and be properly recognized. Women scientists, she says, have to work a lot harder. It's like we still have to prove that we can be scientists. Second, there is the patriarchy encountered when conducting research in marginalized communities, where her aim is to protect and empower rural women who fall under the sway of powerful men. Striving for gender equity is central to her work. Professor Abdul Karim has been showered with awards, too numerous to list here, but just to mention a few. The World Academy of Sciences Lenovo Prize, the African Union's Kwame Nkrumah Prize for Science and Technology, South Africa's Order of Mapungubwe, the 2016 L'Oréal UNESCO Women in Science Award for Africa and the Arab states. In 2017, named by the BBC as one of the 7 trailblazing women in science. Last year, the Christophe Mériot Prize, only the 6th woman scientist to receive the biggest prize of the French Academy of Sciences. Her surname has a familiar ring to it. Yes, she is married to Professor Salim Abdul Karim, and they sometimes collaborate on research projects. Salim may have been the more high-profile figure in South Africa during the pandemic, but as he himself told me last night, Croatia has won twice as many awards as he has. And there is no doubting her international renown. Testimony to this being her recent appointment by the United Nations Secretary General as co-chair of a 10-member UN group tasked with assisting in the attainment of the world's Sustainable Development Goals laid down in Beijing 27 years ago. An assignment taking her far beyond the scope of her medical research. Today, Rhodes University is proud to honor Professor Croatia Abdul Karim, one of the world's leading researchers into HIV/AIDS, who has been at the forefront of the HIV prevention endeavor for over 30 years. It is said that few have done as much to help poor, rural women in South Africa, driven, as she always has been, by a deep concern for social justice and gender equity. She stands as a wonderful role model for all our science graduates here, especially for women scientists for whom she has long been an ardent advocate. Mr. Chancellor, I have the honor to request you to confer on Professor Croatia Abdul Karim the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa.
I confer the degree. Congratulations to you, ma'am.
Sit down and then Mr. Chancellor, I have the honor to present Professor Salim Abdul Karim, who was awarded the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa in absentia at the October 2021 online graduation ceremony. Professor Karim was honored for his outstanding contributions to HIV/AIDS research, establishing South Africa as a respected world authority in the field, and for leading the South African public understanding of the COVID-19 pandemic and our national scientific evidence-based strategy in addressing it. Professor Abdul Karim delivered his acceptance speech in the October 2021 online ceremony. At this ceremony, he will present himself to be hooded. I invite Professor Abdul Karim to come forward and to present himself to be hooded.
The Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellors, Chairperson of Council, the Deans of the various faculties, the leadership of the students, the graduates, the parents of graduates, other distinguished guests, and parents, families, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Let me start, Chancellor, by expressing my immense gratitude of being conferred this honor of doctorate. And it is really an immense privilege to be recognized in this way. And I thank you and the Senate and the Council for this immense recognition. I want to start also by conveying very special congratulations to all the graduates, and special because, as you've heard from the Vice-Chancellor, you have achieved your degrees under very exceptional circumstances. And the fact that your lives were changed, as all of our lives were, very dramatically, just overnight, and the last 2 years have been like a roller coaster ride, you have risen above those. You have demonstrated resilience and fortitude and seamlessly blended into the new way of living. And despite many of the challenges of the loss of lives, of loss of livelihoods, you've persisted and persevered in completing your degrees. And part of that has also been the incredible support that's been provided by the faculty. It reflects both deep commitment of you and the faculty, giving new meaning to the Rhodes University byline of where leaders learn. And this is truly a research-led institution, and where leaders learn is, for me, an interpretation of when thrown curved balls, how do you rise and how do you respond? You've done that in an exemplary way. In the past 2 years, we as the public, we as faculty, we as students, and any role that we play in society, we've all come to recognize the value of science so much more. And that science has given us hope, initially in times of uncertainty, when they was able to allay the fears, sharing what we knew, what we didn't know. We've seen responsiveness. For example, Prof. Roderick Walker from this institution, when there was a shortage of sanitizer, gathering the troops to develop that and distribute that in the Eastern Cape. When we started to see corruption rear its head, he developed those techniques to be able to identify what was below quality and expose that and replace it. So all of these issues have changed our world. But I think the introduction of COVID-19 vaccines was really the hope that, that exemplifies why we are here today. And why we are here today, not in a virtual gathering, but in a physical gathering, is because, again, Rhodes has led the way in having the highest rates of vaccination coverage among staff and students, 99%. Which enables us to start to live a normal life. I wouldn't say we want to go back to pre-COVID times, but at least by gathering and being physically present, we have the opportunity to interact with each other, exchange ideas. But there is no room for complacency, which is why we all have our masks on. Variants of concerns are there to remind us that the battle against SARS-CoV-2 is not over. But today, as you join the ranks of a very elite group and a special privileged group of society and citizens, what you do with your degree is as important and as critical as the milestone you have achieved. COVID-19 has given us a glimpse of what the future looks like. But as much as it's given us a glimpse of the future, it's also reversed the gains that we've made, particularly in low middle income countries, in terms of bridging disparities and trying to change the lives of vulnerable communities wherever they are in the world. So as we build back stronger, some of us have to remind ourselves, if you haven't already been, that this involves lifelong learning, critical thinking, and problem solving. These are key essential traits that you've been imbibed with from the time you chose to study at Rhodes University, during the time you've been at Rhodes, and as you continue towards your apex degrees and other professions as you choose. Overall, science has always helped us advance as human beings. A lot of the things that we take for granted is some of the inspiration that many get in terms of pursuing careers in science. But with COVID-19, we've seen how it is more than just something that we thought of as futuristic, something not relating to our lives. And I don't need to remind graduates of the science faculty how much part of our everyday life it is, and how much continuing to advance our knowledge enables us to move forward as human beings. The world is faced with many disparities. Africa is faced with many disparities. And if we are to leave the world a better place, science is an important first step contributor to that. Taking the new knowledge and delivering it to people who can benefit from it is really what makes the difference and takes the science from merely being new knowledge to really making a change in people's life. I have focused my life for the past 34 years on young women. And some of that has been around technologies to address a major social challenge, which is gender power disparities. And in the 34 years, I have a glimmer of hope on the horizon, but much more remains to be done. It is a good time to thank my family, to thank my mentors, and I just want to highlight a few of my mentors, the late Mervyn Sasser and Zina Stein. Professor Zina Stein was my mentor when I did my master's at Columbia University in 1988. She passed away a few months ago at the age of 99. And Slim and I visited her on September 23rd, not realizing, because when we met with her, we were planning to join her in celebrating her 100th birthday. But a few weeks later, she had a fall and passed away. But Mervyn and Zina were South Africans and had to go into exile. And being in exile, first in Manchester and then in New York, they did not forget their roots. They were as active as part of the anti-apartheid struggle, but also in terms of training South Africans in public health, epidemiology specifically, that until the early 90s remained untaught in many of our institutions in South Africa. And that training created an important science base in South Africa that enabled us to enhance our response to HIV, TB, and use that same infrastructure to rapidly pivot to respond to COVID-19 when it reached, just before it reached our shores, enabling us to be better prepared than some other countries. But I also have to thank my family. In this long journey, Slim has shared with me over the 34 years, and it's a journey, and I keep saying it because I think today, with a sort of ethos of instant gratification, we want everything yesterday. And the reality is that life is a journey with many short lefts and short rights too. And that we have to enjoy that journey. And in that journey, we'll make many mistakes, and we'll learn from those mistakes as we move forward. We all know that to succeed and make a difference requires hard work and many years of hard work. So I thought what I'd do is take you to the Caprisa for backstory, a little bit about, so when you hear a citation, you think like, wow. But I want to remind you that this journey that I have in terms of working with young women isn't something that I woke up one morning and discovered and realized that's what I need to do. And it starts with my return from Columbia University in 1989, joining the South African Medical Research Council, and realizing that while other countries north of us had data about this epidemic that was evolving in their general populations, while we are learning about the HIV epidemic in industrialized countries in North America, Europe, Australia, we knew very little about HIV in the general population. So Slim and I designed and undertook one of the first population-based surveys. In 1990, the HIV prevalence was less than 1%. But when we looked at the data and did something Zina encouraged me to do as a woman scientist, and emerging one, which is look at the gender disaggregated data, I found there was 4 times more infection in women compared to men. And then I did an age and sex disaggregated analysis, and I found that young women were acquiring HIV 5 to 7 years before their male counterparts. And so we know from the antenatal clinic that both young boys and young girls are having HIV, are having sex, and we know that from pregnancies and unplanned pregnancies. But why is it that women were getting infected between ages 15 to 19 and no infection or very little infection in young boys is immediately a very intriguing question. And so what followed was 2 years of interviews with women, different age groups, different settings, peri-urban, rural, urban, in school, out of school, sex workers, and you name it. And what came through from all of those interviews was that women understood their risk and what acquiring HIV meant and how they were acquiring HIV. But what they lacked and what was missing in those days in the sort of context of ABCs, abstinence, behavior change, male condom use, was all of that options required male cooperation. And if these young women are getting infected from men who are 5 to 7 years older than them, they had nothing. And so, you know, for example, one of the things we did was work with sex workers, say, use a condom with every client. And they'd say what it resulted in was loss of income, 75% loss of income. It resulted in gender-based violence, being beaten up by clients. And because sex work is criminalized, it also, if they had a condom on them and they were arrested by a policeman or woman, they were then charged with being sex workers because that was used as evidence. So the woman came back to us and said, well, you are smart scientists. Why don't you develop something that we can use? And that's where the woman-initiated technology idea arose. And we started to look at what is it we can use to make this available, because we can't start from scratch. We looked at what were the drugs on the shelf, a little bit like COVID. When we first started, we didn't have a treatment, but we looked at drugs that were already available, and in this case, vaginal contraceptives. And my dear mentor, Zina, who was the ultimate and consummate hustler, found a place to get us some of these vaginal films and do one of the first microbicide trials of a vaginal film that was infused with nanoxynol 9, which at that time was used impregnated in condoms, was an FDA-registered vaginal contraceptive. And from there, we moved on to gels, and for 12 years, by this time, Zina had published an article in the American Journal of Public Health, drawing world attention and donor attention to this gap that we have, a major problem of rising infections in young women particularly, and an increasing risk in women, lack of women-initiated technologies. She referred to it as virucides. And the world slowly started to join hands in terms, and this was largely academics, small industries, and so on, not the big pharma, trying to find women-initiated technologies. And for 18 years, we tried different things, and each time we were met with failure. And you know, when we do these trials, it's very public. So we in prevention science, we testing these microbicides, became known as experts in failure. And Slim and I give ourselves the first prize in being experts in failure. But I should say, you know, Madiba's, one of many Madiba's inspiring quotes is, when you fail, you can cry a little bit, you can dust yourself, learn from that failure and continue. And that's what we continued to do. And then in the early 2000s, we got involved as the number of AIDS cases started to rise, to use a drug in one of the antiretroviral combinations for treatment, a drug called tenofovir. This drug was shown to be very safe, few side effects, very forgiving if you missed a dose or two. And we said, if you're going to give something to otherwise healthy people, why don't we test the tenofovir as a gel to prevent infection in women? And that's when we decided to change our strategy from repurposed products, from non-specific products to an ARV-specific product for preventing HIV infection. And what we barely had we started, you know, we had to negotiate getting the active product from Gilead Sciences that was producing it, make the gel, and all of that. And we barely enrolled the first 2 participants when our peers in the very prestigious journal called Nature decided to attack us, and the headline ran, "Trial Doomed to Failure by Design." Okay, so that's our peers in the pages of Nature. So we had to defend that. And one of the things that had happened is, at that stage, people were promoting daily use of product. And we used a coitally dependent dosing strategy that took inspiration from the mother-to-child transmission trials that were done, and also from the evidence that we had from non-human primate data and early safety data on the use of tenofovir, to say and informed primarily by the potential volunteers into the trial and potential longer-term beneficiaries of this technology, that they don't see their husbands every day, and they did not want a product that needed daily use. And so working with the community, we learned a good strategy and tried to then knit the science to match that. And what it was about taking risks. While the world was going very slowly and safely, testing slowly one product at a time, we took a leap of faith based on a good set of considered reasons. And taking that risk was what brought out the ire in some of our colleagues and the Nature article. In 2010, we announced the data, and as you heard, this was really quite a game changer in terms of preventing HIV infection, which remains one of the biggest challenges we face. We've seen with antiretroviral treatment, an inevitably fatal condition of AIDS was transformed to something that's chronic and manageable, and today millions benefit from it. But we still have 3 times more infection than we need to be having to meet the UN 2030 targets of ending AIDS as a public health threat. And COVID has exacerbated us being off track, and a reminder that we have many unfinished pandemics, and how do we continue with those and not move our gaze when a new pandemic comes along. And we are now entering an era where we will be faced with many pandemics. But also with each pandemic, if it's anything like SARS-CoV-2, we've seen there are multiple impacts on society. It's not just the loss of lives, which is severe and devastating, but also the instability to the economy, the loss of livelihoods. Here again, women bear the brunt because they're part of the gray and informal economy that's not recognized every time there's a social safety net handed out. And so all of this is, did we stop at 2010? No, we spent the next 10 years trying to understand why did we not do better on the CAPRISA 004 trial. And so we unraveled a whole lot of biological factors. And now we are moving towards also evaluating, as others are, long-acting, slow-release products that are less dependent on daily adherence, and also antibodies. But I'll leave you to watch that space and look out for the publications in the next several years around the use of broadly neutralizing antibodies that have been identified from one of our study participants, but offers hope to the rest of Africa, and for the first time, hope from Africa to the rest of the world. So all of that is to say, I hope that what I've captured to you is the common themes that you hear over and over again, that science is not something that's quick, that you will get an answer very rapidly, and you can move on and play golf or tennis or whatever for the rest of your life, that it requires passion. You will meet many, many challenges on that path, and you have to stay the course. And when you're passionate about it, you won't mind the hours, you won't mind the time, and you won't give up in a hurry. And you'll be faced with many distractions, you know, those good friends that tell you, time to party, what are you doing, you know, in the lab all these hours and so on. And I'm not saying you should not have fun. Fun is part of living, and fun is part of the richness of our lives. And we all know that more acutely, having missed that social interactions in the past 2 years. But it is also about riding on the shoulders of giants, and there are many giants that have supported us, and I omitted to mention Professor Jerry Kovadia, who some of you may know, and also Prof. Jack Moodley. My 3 children, Safura, Aisha, and Wasim, and my late parents. My many teachers who've helped me get where I am. So to you, graduates, There will be many, many challenges facing you, but it's an exciting world out there. You have heard from the Vice Chancellor that Africa particularly has so many challenges, not just in health, but in terms of us leading and finding solutions, and science has a critical role to play in that. So as you make your choices and as you make your decisions, as you have chosen to be here, what do you do with your life, and how do you let the present define the future? I encourage you to go forth and live a life worth living and leave the world a better place for having been in it, and live the Rhodes University tagline of where leaders learn. Let your learning be lifelong, let it be critical, and let it be applied to the many problems that face us. I thank you very much.